And we're live. Happy Friday. Yeah, I know we'll do the goodbye wave at the beginning. So good afternoon. Oh, I got to do something. There's always something that you don't expect and needs to be adjusted. There we go. The adjustment is made. And can you hear me? I think I can. I heard myself on the YouTube echo. Excuse me. So it's another Friday Pie Day, or drama as we call it in-house, Dave Rush AMA. This is a presentation of Total Seminars, and Mike has very kindly allowed me to take his Friday slot and modify it a little bit and turn it into Pie Day Friday. It's kind of about pies. We use pies as a mechanism to teach A+ and Net+ and Security+ topics. Let me do a little adjusting here. Wow, there is so many ways to do this. And good news is I don't need to see myself mostly, so I can do that. All right, so we do two things then. We use Raspberry Pis as a tool to learn CompTIA classes and to go above and beyond them. And then I like to go above and beyond that and say, let's do something special or specific to the Raspberry Pi. We do this every Friday at 2 o'clock Central Time. Goes for about 2 hours, give or take. If everybody's got Friday evening, let's get the heck out of here and go do something fun, then we may wind it up a little bit earlier. I won't run long. You guys are all watching Scott, and everybody knows Scott, and he is the master of time as far as this thing goes, and a lot of other things running behind the scenes, and running beyond 4 o'clock Central will bring down his horrible wrath. And yeah, that's right. He says whipcrapping, and I was afraid to use that word, but so be it. And he doesn't use whips. He has swords and other medieval instruments of destruction. So I fear. Okay, notes. Did that. Raspberry Pi. Now this is an Ask Me Anything. It's a Dave Rush Ask Me Anything, but we are wide open to any questions. Certainly I want to hear your Pi questions. What can I do with it? Why should I get it? Where do I spend my money to do it? Your own experiences. I'd love to hear who's doing what with Pis. But I also will be more than happy to take your questions about, well, anything. It's an Ask Me Anything. Certainly focus things toward CompTIA training, A+, Net+, Security+, ITF+. But if you want to go a little off the rails, we'll explore whether or not that's possible. And if it's not, we will pass it off to Mike. Mike anticipates being here again on his usual 2 days next week. Those of you who aren't aware, he's traveling. We talked with him this morning in South Dakota again with a worse internet connection this morning than he had last night. So hopefully by the time Monday rolls around, he will have moved to someplace with a little better internet service, and we'll work on that. If you would like to get in touch with me, you can. We have to go back to this menu, or this one, or this one. Hey, that's a good way to do it. And hit the screen share button. You can find me at my work email address, daver@totalsem.com, or my personal address, drushtx@yahoo. That's Dave Rush, Texas at Yahoo. Don't use them both. You got a question for me? I got a couple of questions in yesterday. They were quick answer things, nothing we needed to put online here. But if you've got a question for me that you want to get into a little more depth, or even just a simple one, by all means, write me at one of those. They each forward to the other. That's why I don't want you to do both, or they wind up in an endless cycle. My plan next week is to take 2 hours out of my life and steam. I have not gamed in more time than I care to remember. So if and when you're hunting for me, or at least looking me up, you'll find me on Steam as drushtx. And you can try and get hold of us by telephone. That's the office number for Total Seminars. There's nobody in the offices, but the phones are forwarded to the various people who normally answer phones and sometimes who don't. And if you can convince them that I've just got to talk to Dave or Mike or Scott, they may find a way to get you directly in touch with us. Hey, we're back. I have 45 different documents open on a single monitor system. I've got to find the right one. There it is. Because you are kind enough to join us this week, join Mike, and to join me on my little Friday shindig, we have a special offer for you. Let's go share again. Should have stayed on that page. There it is. Share it. I might have to set up a second monitor after all this, but I hate for you to have to see me move my head over there or over there to another monitor. It just lacks prettiness. So we have a weekly special. And this week's Q&A special deal, 50% off Total Tester standalone products. Now we have the usual ones that you would expect. We've got ITF plus practice. Yeah, these are practice tests. So ITF and A plus, Net plus, Sec plus, but we have plenty of other ones. I don't think we have Cloud plus in it, but I think we've got a CEH one in there and an AWS one and piles and piles of other one. And the really cool thing about our Total Tester not only is the incredible breadth and depth of questions and quantity of them, but Michael Meyers has pretty much created a duplication in many, many respects of the CompTIA exam environment. So it looks like it, it smells like it tastes like it, and it goes a step above and beyond. You can create tests in a number of different ways. I just want to be tested on chapter 1 contents from the book. I want to take a test that's timed or untimed. I want to take a test that has the same topical weighting as the test from CompTIA. So really powerful program. So if you're looking for practice tests, man, people just eat these things up. I think the A plus has 1,200 questions, something like that. So to take advantage of that 50% off sale, use code MMLive803 when you check out. It's good through August 9th. If you're a teacher participating with us today, contact Kathy Y at TotalSem.com. She has some tools and gifts to help you conduct your remote learning classes. They're awesome. They're wonderful. If you're not a teacher and you try and contact Kathy Y at TotalSem.com, she will find you, hunt you down, and murder you in the street. I didn't say that out loud, did I? Please don't waste your time. Let us provide for the teachers that really need this stuff. It's appropriate for them. It's not something that everybody here needs. Okay, very good. Scott has posted that. So let's talk a little bit about where we've gone up to this point. In our first AMA last Friday, in our first Q&A, we looked at a really fundamental thing that says, I'm going to get interested in what Dave's talking about. How do I participate? So we talked about where to get a Raspberry Pi, some different models that were available, what you needed to make it run. We took a look at some of the operating systems. The big primary #1 operating system currently goes by the name Raspberry Pi OS. We used to know that as Raspbian if you run across that term in your research online. Raspbian is now Raspberry Pi OS. It is a version, what they call a distro of Debian Linux. Very, very, very popular base model of Linux. It's what Ubuntu is based on, probably the biggest user-oriented version of Linux. We looked at how to set up your Pi for the first time and different ways to operate it. You could use like a traditional computer that you're probably using right now at your desk right now or with your laptop. It's got a keyboard, it's got a mouse, it's got a monitor. But we don't have to do it that way. We can enable the SSH server on it and access it with a terminal program like PuTTY or the Microsoft terminal program, excuse me. Or you can use it with a remote keyboard, mouse, and keyboard. It has a built-in Real VNC server. Just download the Real VNC client and you've got a box. This isn't a Raspberry Pi, but it kind of looks like one. And the only thing it needs physically connected to it is a power cable. You can use the wireless interface. You could use a wired interface if you like, and just talk to the thing remotely. You can even talk to the thing remotely, not just across the room, but you can set up for remote access across the internet. After we got it set up and running last week, we set up a basic FTP server, the VS FTP server with the VSFTPD. And then we tested it. We used Wireshark to demonstrate a bunch of things. First of all, to show us what we hopefully already knew or need to know for A+ and Net+, and even a little bit of Security+. And that's that standard FTP runs on ports 20 and 21. We also learned, and this was a great lesson because some people did kind of the facepalm, that it's not secure. FTP, regular good old-fashioned boring FTP, is not secure. So if people were to intercept or use Wireshark and watch what you're doing, they would see everything that you upload and download and manipulate. So that's last week. Today's topics in a nutshell. I got a lot of span here. We may or may not get to all of it, but if I don't, I'll push some off till next week, and I'll try and get through it in a reasonable amount of time. We're going to talk about the command line for FTP. So I did a demonstration last week of a couple of commands, but it wasn't really to demonstrate the commands. It was so that we could do the Wireshark job. So today we're going to look into that a little further, and I'll tell you why. I want to do a nice little demonstration. It's quick and fun on the SCP command, secure copy. Secure copy is a way to move files back and forth to a computer that runs an SSH server. Doesn't need to have an FTP server. So that's really cool. And be thinking about that as I throw the question out later. Anything that we do that takes advantage of SSH services runs on the same port as SSH. So be thinking about that. What port does SSH run on? We're going to make those go fairly quickly, I hope. Then I want to burrow into today's primary topic, the Linux file system. I want to show you what files and what folders are there and are common and are important, and how to navigate that file system. And then special lab at the end of the day, we're going to do a Telnet installation. Telnet is like SSH, except it's unsecure and it's bad and nobody should ever use it outside of a lab experiment like this. But there's questions about it on the test. You're going to have to know the port number for that. Hey, another research project for you between now and the time we get there. And then I'm going to do a Wireshark comparison of connecting with Telnet versus connecting with SSH, and do some stuff that will be kind of cool. So that's all that stuff. Big feature, fun lab demo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at the feed, see if there's any questions that have popped up to address. And moving from there, then I'm going to move straight into our first topic, FTP commands. And I heard my phone ding, and it wasn't something for me, so I'm good. Hello, Dr. Waggs. I'll go back a little bit. Hollywood's here. TK's here. I've talked with you guys as I came in. And there's Dr. Quinn. Hello, and everybody. It's time to put your photo on, Mr. Rush. So yeah, you might have seen that we've modified the banner a little bit. It's no longer a picture of a Raspberry Pi. Michael Smyer, our in-house everything guru, is also quite the photographer, and he and I met early in the week, and he was kind enough to take some headshots for me. So I'll be sending those to my agent as he gets me to that nice position in Hollywood. Tell you what, during this pandemic, I'm working for my church, building PCs for our tech area and learning how to live stream the service. That is so cool, Tuluit. Tons and tons of options. As you know, when Scott and I and Michael are working together and Mike's not around, we use Zoom and feed that to a YouTube feed. And of course, we do that for our guests who come in. When Mike is doing his, he uses a video switching software program called OBS, and that pumps data straight to YouTube. We were talking this morning about doing some testing with Google. They've got Google Meetings right now. So lots of good stuff. Thank you about my van. Yeah, that's my rule. If you see a concert shirt or some other concert thing up here, I attended that one, and we were all set to attend the Doobie Brothers concert. Those of you who are familiar and old enough, this October, I don't know what the date was, call it October 10th. And a month or so ago, 6 weeks or so ago, we got an email that says the Doobie Brothers concert has been rescheduled to October 14th, whatever it was 4 days later, and with, okay, well, no big deal, minor adjustment to the calendar, until we read a little more closely. It says Doobie Brothers concert rescheduled to October 14th, 2021. So it was about a year and a quarter, almost a year and a half out. So, okay, we'll see Doobies again next year. Oh, using Pi to learn CompTIA. How does it work? Well, stick around. Now, I also want, for anybody who's new at this and hasn't seen this before, go check out last Friday's Q&A. It's on the Total Sem live channel or YouTube channel. And all the Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, and before that, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Fridays that Mike did, they're all recorded and they're all there. I'm in the process of building an index that we're going to post someplace. So when you want to go look up any particular thing that Mike or I or Scott has talked about, or our guest host, you can just look through that index. But for now, I've only got 2 shows under my belt. This one just started, and the one that we did last Friday. So if you'll take a look, whatever date that was, 8/1 or 7/31, I think it was, you can get all that, how I can use a Pi to learn, TK, and all the how does it work and so forth. So we're just going to turn this into an ever-growing course, as if you were going to take kind of a high school or college course on the Raspberry Pi and CompTIA. So Linux is, thank you, Scott. I'm not going to read your stuff out loud. Yes, definitely a useful tool in A+. The stuff we're going to do today, and especially next week, you have to know a certain set of Linux commands for A+. And I'm going to cover almost every one of the ones that you have to know next week. I've covered some of them already, and then I'll pick up some slack on the, let's call it obscure ones, probably the week after that. Hello, Mario. And I think I connected with you on LinkedIn, Mario. I know I did. And anybody else, you can find me on LinkedIn. Just look under Total Seminars Employees or Dave Rush. I think there's more, maybe more than one Dave Rush on LinkedIn, but I'm fairly recognizable by my profile. What's the most complex Pi project I have done? 2 of them. An expandable cluster system. I brought a pile of the cluster a week or 2 ago, or a few weeks ago. I don't have one sitting on my desk here now, but it started out with a half a dozen Pis and a controlling one. And the goal on that one was to make it expandable. So there was a learning thing in there. I wanted to learn about messaging. There is this neat technology when you have, I think you've also, what was the movie that, somebody answered this online as I tried to phrase it, the guy who gets stranded on Mars. You'll come up with it. So whatever that movie was, at some point we see one of our intrepid heroes go into this room full of supercomputers, and he directly connects his laptop to one of the computers, which isn't done in the way. But when you get a bunch of supercomputers working together, it's a very coordinated process, and they need a program. Interstellar? No, it wasn't Interstellar. That was the one where they wind up in black holes and change relative rates of time. The Martian. Thank you, Ian Camacho. A familiar name to be sure. Anybody who doesn't know, Ian Camacho is a new joinee at Total Seminars. He's working closely with Scott, writing and editing, so please make him all feel welcome. So all those guys working together, they have to have this coordinating program, and it's called messaging service. It's very different than the messaging services that you and I mess with, but that's one of the great things that you can do with Pis is use them to create artificial supercomputers and learn messaging service. And then I wanted to make sure that that was an easily expandable thing. And I don't know if it was most complex, because it was pretty easy, but it's got a lot of Pis involved, and that's a video wall. So there's this really cool technique. Take your favorite monitor, whatever you like, a 1080 monitor, a VGA monitor, whatever, and you get a Pi connected to every monitor, and they're all networked together through a switch, and then you get a master controlling Pi, and you work on that Pi, and you specify how much of an image or frame that you're looking at will appear on any given monitor. So you can make nice even 6x3 spreads, and so you get this video wall with a chunk of it and a chunk of it and a chunk of it and so forth. And of course, you take 15 monitors or 9 monitors or 12 or 30 monitors or whatever, and you turn them all into separate elements that each hold parts of a screen. Now that's really cool to do, and it's great for, you know, doing monstrous video walls with a whole bunch of big TVs. But I've seen some really good art systems where people take different resolution monitors. They're rectangular and they're horizontal, and they've got different resolutions, and they can put different images from the screen on them. And check that out, Raspberry Pi video wall art. Really neat stuff out there. Hope that helps. Where that was a Tullywood question, most complex. Kulan, I'll try it. I'm going to guess the J is silent and call it Yargle Psychon. Could be Jargle Psychon. Like the topic, could you explain about mounting file? I'm going to do mounting as a process in a week from now, but I will at least touch on it a little bit. For streaming, you're using ATEM Mini. Okay, so you're doing hardware, and that's great. We also have an ATEM box that we use in our shooting arena, ATEM boxes. Very welcome, TK, CompTIA Pi Plus. Oh gosh. Raspberry Pi does have their own certification right now. It's for instructors. And I'll tell you what, I've been trying to get into their instructor program since it's existed. So I can say Raspberry Pi certified Pi instructor or whatever the title is. And I don't make the grade. And the reason is I don't teach in a traditional school environment. So they don't like us folks right now who do contract training, even if we're out there, you know, kind of serving underserved. But nope, you got to be employed by a school system. And they hold these seminars in UK and Europe and the US a couple of times a year. And I foolishly apply every year and get disappointed every time, or twice a year. Oh, yes, it was Martian with Matt. No. Yes, it was Matt Damon. I was thinking it was his other guy, Clooney, but whatever. Dave Rush name still not working on at sign. I'm not sure where that's going, Scott. Maybe you could help out. Question from Mario. Matt Damon, Scott. Oh my God. You are good, but that is like over the top good. Nice. Oh, okay. I see what you're up to, Scott and Mario. Yeah, right. There you go. So you won't see it light up, Mario, when you do the @ and somebody's name, but the person who's intended to receive it does see that. Okay. Pi certs. Yes. Yeah, I'm working on getting blessed in-house once we start shooting again at shooting a regular course, kind of like this, in a little more focused and condensed fashion, and making that one of our offerings. We'll see how that goes. I'm glad Trevor liked Scott's social engineering zone. That's, I think, one of the most fun ones that we ever shot as a group. And if you also get a chance, I don't know if we put this up on YouTube, but if you ever get to see Scott mounted on horseback closing out one of the classes, that will just leave you rolling. Nope, it's working, Mario. Yes, as I said, you won't see it light up, but the recipient does. TK, I just don't have an idea and what to start learning Pi. Lots of components out there. It looks complicated. It's not. It certainly can be, but in its simplest format, a Raspberry Pi and a power supply, and everything else that you need in a complicated way is there. But if you want to do it in a super simple way, you've already got a mouse and a keyboard. You plug them in, and there's a little HDMI connector on here. Plug the HDMI cable into your HDMI monitor, and you got a computer. And take a look at my last video to see how to install the operating system, or you can buy one that's pre-installed. They overcharge you for some silly little micro SD cards, but you can plug that in and it's ready to rock. But I don't want you to spend money you don't have to. You can go out and buy yourself a $4 or $5 micro SD card. And I've got instructions on that last video on how to set it up. Tolowit is working with Mario. Everybody's working. Hello. Okay. Oh, so you don't type in at Dave, Mario. You type at, and you start typing Dave, and you'll see a menu of people whose names start with D or DA or whatever, and you pick it from the menu. All right. We are through questions. I'm sure Dave will leave it in any case. I'll receive it. Yes, absolutely. Scott reads all of these, and if I miss anything, he highlights them or sends them to me on the back channel. So we are then ready to start. First topic of today, FTP commands. Now, for the most part, there are no specific FTP commands. Gee, I've never heard that, Tolowit. Are no longer hard required as a specific objective. In the last iteration of A+ and Net+, you had to know certain specific commands. So those are dropped now. Now you got to know about FTP and about their ports and things like that. But I want to cover them because I'm looking to help expand your Linux savvy. So we're going to talk about a handful of commands in here. It's going to go much quicker than this list is going to sound like. Oh, Scott, Cheech and Chong reference, really? So we're going to talk about opening, the commands, open, close, a command called binary, kind of a useful thing. LS, that's a really, really important command that you're going to spend your life using in the Linux command line. Same thing for the CD command, change directory. We're going to look at get and put, mget, mput, rm, that's to remove a file. In some environments, we've got mdelete. I'm going to show you the prompt command. Doesn't do what it thinks. The PW command, there's a very specific reference in, sorry, not PW, PWD, in the objectives that says you must know the difference and therefore what each one does between the PWD and the PASSWD commands. I listed LS twice here in my notes. I got make dir, remove dir, CD twice, and LCD. LCD is special to Microsoft. Now you can use an FTP server really easily without knowing anything here. Boy, good grammar, right? So you can use a browser as an FTP client. Just put in FTP : whack and the site name or the IP address. That's a fun thing to do. Go Google sometime live FTP sites, and especially you'll find in that listing the NASA sites. NASA takes all of their pictures and really cool things, and they put them on an FTP site. And you can go browse those and look at the things and download them. It's really slick. You can use a third-party graphical user interface. Everybody's favorite one in the planet is FileZilla. See a question over there from Trevor. FTP over SSH. Yes, you absolutely can do FTP over SSH. It's called SFTP at that point. And I've got a specific presentation coming up on that on another time, another session. Where do you get a command line FTP program? You've already got it. It's already built into all of the versions of Windows. It's already built into all the versions of Linux. And I believe, somebody might correct me if I'm wrong, I think there is one in Mac OS. No, there isn't. I checked on that yesterday. Mac OS does not have a built-in FTP client program, but you can install one. So we're going to use the Windows FTP client. And let me fire this guy up and show you a little bit. First, we have to share it. Click this, click that. And I'm going to blow this up, see if that helps. Let me take a look at the, okay, that's fairly full screen. So I've opened up just a regular Windows command prompt here. I didn't even use administrative mode. This is just CMD. So I'm going to type in the command FTP, enter, and I find myself at the FTP prompt. So what you have to do is establish a connection with some FTP server. To do that, we use the open command. And you can use the IP address, or if it's registered on the domain with a name, or with DNS with a DNS name, you could use that. I have to use the IP address, so 192.168.1.137. And poof, now I set this FTP server up a while ago, and I programmed this banner, so anytime anybody connects to it, they're going to see, welcome to Raspberry Pi FTP service. You could change the banner if you use the same FTP server that I use to anything you like there. So it's asking me for a username. Right click the file bar and increase. Go full screen. Hope that's what you mean. Increase the font size. That's what you want. I could do that. I've made a real mess on my system in doing this. Okay, hopefully that's a little bigger. So it's prompting me for a user account name. I'm going to put in Pi. And like all Linux systems, when you type in the password, you won't see anything happen. The cursor won't move, stars don't appear. So you just got to type carefully, RASPBERRY. Login successful. I love that stuff. Now the FTP client isn't a PuTTY client. It's not an SSH client. So there's commands that you could do in SSH that you can't do here. For instance, if I type in clear to clear the screen, it says, I don't know what you're talking about, bud. So we live with a cluttered screen in FTP. That's life. Shortcut. If you want to know what commands are supported in your FTP environment, just type in the word help. And this one is interesting. This is the Microsoft version of the FTP client. That means they do some things a little bit different than some other versions of it. And there's also commands that exist in here. No, they are supported. I couldn't find binary the other day, but it is there. So, okay, first and most important thing when I log into an FTP server is I want to know where I'm at. So I'm going to type in pwd, present working directory, originally called print working directory, print it out to the screen. And I was doing something with somebody online recently, and I said present working directory, and they just came unglued. I apparently am not old enough to have remembered print. So fine, it's the working directory where I'm at. And it says I'm in the root directory. A / all by itself is the top of the file structure. Now, those of us who were here last week know that this is a false root. I'm actually 3 levels deep in the system, and the upper levels are hidden from me as a user, and that's kind of cool. So I want to see what's in here with me. I'll use the ls command. It looks and works like the ls command that you'll find in the terminal environment. It is actually a different command. So it says the only thing you've got in here is a directory, and it's called files. There's no files in here, and there's no other folders or directories in here. I'm going to use the term directory because we're in the command line, and that's the right term. So I'm going to, because it's below me, say cd space files. And if you do something wrong, you get an error message. If you do something right, all you do is either get nothing if you're in the terminal environment, or you get from FTP successfully changed. So if I do my pwd command again, now I'm in /files. That's my current directory. And if I do an ls in here, I have a list of files. There's a PNG file and a text file, some PNGs and JPEGs, and there's no directories under here. I'm going to do a different kind of ls, just to tease a little bit, ls space -l, and I get a lot more techie-wecky details about those files at another time. Now, I want one of those files from there to the client side, to my Windows machine. To do that, to get a single file, we do a thing called get. So I'm just going to say get. There we go. And the name of a file. And in Linux, files are case sensitive. So I'm going to take this one called demo file over here, and I'm going to purposely mess it up a little bit. I'm going to say capital D, EMOFILE .txt. And it's going to, if everything works correctly, copy that file to whatever my present working directory was when I started this on the Windows side. So it's C:\users/ Dave Rush or drush, whatever it is. Hey, Dave lied. It allowed me to use mixed case. That's because this is a Windows version of the FTP program. If you use the Linux version of it, it would say unable to find that file. So, okay. Oh, wait a minute. Nope, I'm sorry. It didn't. The command was successful, but it failed to open the file. Right. Okay. So he couldn't find the capital D MO file. I'm going to hit the up arrow. It works like Windows, and change this capital D to a lowercase d. Now it matches the file name. And hey, much better. I opened binary mode. I'll get into that. Transfer complete. So we've copied a file called demo file over to my home folder on the FTP side. Now watch this. This is really amazing. Let's say that I changed demo file here. I used some kind of editor and I changed its contents, and I'm going to copy it again. Get demo file.txt. Now there's already a file called demo file.txt on my Windows side, right? So answer this question in your head. You got a 50-50 possibility. It's going to overwrite the old file, or it's going to say, hey, there's a file by that same name. Do you want to overwrite this? Or no, I won't do this, something like that. So got an answer in your head? I hear you thinking the logic both directions. Here we go. Transfer complete. It doesn't even warn you. FTP has this bizarre assumption that we know what we're doing. So it's just going to overwrite it. It's going to overwrite it, and you don't get any kind of notification. Now let's say that I open up a window on my Windows side and I edit that file over there. And I want to copy it up here. So instead of a get, I'm going to use a put. So I'll say put demo file. That means it's coming from my Windows side, and I'm going to put it into this folder. .txt. Same question. Is this one just going to overwrite blindly like it did on the get side, or will we get a warning? Counting down in 3, 2, 1. Successful. I overwrote it. I didn't care. You must know what you're doing. So a little dangerous, right? Now, how about I have multiple files that I want to get? Well, we have mget and mput. Tell you what, I got a couple files over on my local side that start with demo file. So I'm going to put copy. Let's do an ls here. I know it's cluttered. That's kind of the nature of the beast. I have this one text file right now, demo file.txt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mput demo star.txt. Any file that has the extension txt and begins with the word demo, I want it to put over here. And it says, hey, I found one. It's called demo file-1.txt. And what he's waiting for here is a yes or a no. So maybe I don't want to overwrite this one, or maybe I didn't want to copy that one. I would say N. I'm just going to hit the letter Y here. And it happened. So we, oops, wait a minute. I was asking about demo file. I got to say yes to that. 2 files are done, and I'm back down to the prompt. So now we do an ls. And there's my 2 demo files. I'm going to copy them again using the exact same command, but this time before I run the command, I'm going to use the command prompt. This will toggle back and forth between interactive question and yes or no type things. So now interactive mode is off. It was on. So I'll do another input, demo star.txt. He doesn't bother to prompt me. Do you want this? Do you want that? He just says, okay, I'm doing them all. And I can toggle prompt back on for future. And there we go. The same thing if I wanted to copy these Wireshark PNG files. I would do an mget. And I'm going to do prompt. Okay, thank you, Scott. I'll finish this demo and then come back. So now I'm interactive mode off. I'm going to mget all these Wireshark files that are PNG extensions. This might take a few micro moments. Not bad. And there we go. So that beats the heck out of answering yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. All right, let's come talk to you for a minute and talk about some things we're going to do further. I should have taken my drink while I was there, right? I want to talk about a kind of a server, an FTP server that we didn't set up here, but I want you to be aware of. And the NASA server works this way. So it's kind of important to know why we do what we do. There is a kind of FTP server called an anonymous FTP server. We set that up in the configuration file for this particular server. And when we say this thing is an anonymous server, when you connect to it with an FTP client and it prompts you for an account name, you put in the word anonymous. Got to spell it right. And different servers work differently on the next step. Most of them will ask you for a password. And in fact, what they will ask you for is an email address. They don't collect them. You can put in anything you want as long as it looks like an email address. So whenever I hit an anonymous FTP server, I put in mail@email.com or something like that. And you're in, and you can use these commands, or you can use the graphical utilities and go explore. So again, I really encourage you to go run around and check out that NASA one and a couple of the others, and try anonymous as your first hit. All right, let me go down and check my notes and see where I wanted to go with this. I guess I'll show you this real quick. Let me share back with that utility one more time. Again, this is a Windows version of the FTP client. And for that reason, it has some commands that regular FTP clients don't. For instance, I can do the dir command. You can't do that with a regular FTP client. But Microsoft says, hey, that's what people are used to. Now, what if I want to get a directory on the local side? We do that by preceding the command with an exclamation point. So I would say, remember the code for exclamation point? That's a bang. So I'll say bang dir. And there's all the stuff in my home folder. There's the Wireshark files that I just copied over there, the PNGs. And up here are the demo files that I was copying up and down. So cool and slick. All right, that's the bulk of it. It's not an all-inclusive list. Oh, I said I'd mention the binary, so let me show you that. And let me tell you a bit about it first, I think is the right way to go here. A billion years ago, when the internet was new and Unix was new and Linux didn't even exist, it came a little bit favor. It's kind of a copy of some early Unix stuff. We weren't using 8-bit bytes. IBM and Burroughs and Honeywell and all those computers were using 7-bit bytes. With 7 bits, you got 128 characters. That's enough to do everything that was being developed in the United States with English. So we got capital A through capital Z and small a through small z and 0 through 9 and the standard mathematical symbols and the standard punctuation symbols. And there was plenty of room left over. But as we moved and added international support and other special characters, 7 bits was no longer enough and the world moved to an 8-bit byte. Well, some FTP servers and clients still think we're in those Stone Ages and we operate with 7-bit bytes. And that means if you're in 7-bit mode and you copy files that have 8-bit bytes, and they all do, the file's just going to come in corrupt. So let's do some sharing. And all you have to do to force the system to use always 8-bit bytes, and it'll never hurt you to do it, is to just type in the command, really, there we go, binary. Switching to binary mode. Now, it was already in binary mode, and I didn't even know how to switch it back to 7-bit mode. I'm sure I could find it with help, but you get the idea. Some of these commands, I think I showed you at the beginning of that, have switches. So LSL, LS minus A. All right, close enough. And I think that was the last thing I wanted to do. Yes, on that. Oh, no, it's the last thing. When you are done with your session, there are 2 ways to get out of it. One of them is to issue the close command. The close command will stop your session with this FTP server, but leave you at the FTP prompt so you can open a session with the same server again or another one. To get out of it altogether, it's an old thing, and the exit command wasn't considered yet. So you have to type in the word bye. And if you do bye instead of close, it will close and then exit the utility. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just say bye. Oh, in fact, I'll tell you what, let's not do it right. Let's type in exit. I don't know what you're talking about. Exit doesn't exist in FTP. Okay, bye. And there we go. I'm back to Windows. So that's common FTP commands. There's more to it. This isn't a light brush of it, but it's certainly not a full brush of it. And I guess that kind of sort of makes sense. Let me take a look at some questions, see where we're at. And then I'm going to move on to SCP, which is, I've always known about SCP, but I only started recently using it, and specifically for here. And oh my gosh, I am in love. All right. Finding the question V, there it is. Dave's not here, you Cheech and Chong, right? That's where I left off. So we did FTP over SSH. So no, you don't need sudo to run the FTP client. It's, in fact, I didn't, because I was on a regular Joe Schmo host. We'll get into I got a specific lesson coming up in future, when to use sudo and when not, but I'll let you know if we need it here. And for my new YouTube channel, for the Drivers of Hawaii series from my dash cam footage. Yeah, I love that. I just ordered my first dash cam. I can't wait. I don't drive to work much anymore, but I have a very long commute from my house to Total Seminars. And I have seen many amazing things, wrecks and whatever. And I think they need to go on YouTube. I'm getting an input for multiples. Axe, says Scott. Are we doing a TCP acknowledgement? What CPU is in the Pi? It's a Broadcom manufactured ARM CPU. They've run through a series of them, A6, A7, and I think the current ones are A8s. There are 4-core, and I don't know if you know the details of this, but in general, you don't buy an off-the-shelf CPU. You start with a primary template from ARM, and then you work with ARM on the pieces that you want not to be there or to be there. There's a couple in there that are video and audio accelerators that aren't turned on because the people who own those accelerator technologies, the MPEG group and whatever the audio piece is right now, they don't offer that as a free license, and CompTIA. Raspberry Pi doesn't want to pay for that license and build that into the base price of the Pi. So what happens is that's built into the silicon to be enabled. Then the silicon gets manufactured by some manufacturer. Broadcom is a very popular manufacturer of ARM chips, but they're not the only one. And then when you get your Pi and you get it up and running, if you want those accelerators turned on, you cough up a couple of bucks, $2 for one of them and $3 for the other, and change to Raspberry Pi and to the foundation, and you have to submit your serial number because it's tied to your CPU serial number. I'm going to show you how to learn that number today. I got a lesson for that. And there's a form that you fill out, and they email you these 2 numbers, and there's a little method to put those numbers in, and that will enable that hardware support for the life of the Pi with the modern ones. And the old ones, you had to do it every time you booted the Pi to turn it on, or every time you ran a program. Okay, that was a long answer for a very short question. Went mic mode on that. So Scott wants us to explain interactive mode. Interactive mode is true in both FTP and a lot of other things. It's when a program or process stops and says, are you sure you want to do this? And gives you a chance to type in yes or no or Y or N. We do that during some kinds of installation programs. Whenever you do an update and an upgrade, check out my class from last week, my presentation from last week, and you'll see when we did an upgrade on all of the upgradable everything that's in the Pi, the operating system and the various apps and whatever. He stopped before we did that and said, do you really want to do this, yes or no? And I showed you last week a trick with the particular utility we were using on how you can pre-feed the answer to it. So interactive mode is when any program stops and wants to communicate with you to determine what we're doing next. Maybe it's not just yes or no. Interactive could be any kind of interaction with any kind of program. If you're doing input and it's giving you output, it's interactive, right? Raspberry Pi 4 uses Broadcom, thank you, way to go, Mario. The BCM 2711 SoC, system on a chip, 1.5 gigahertz. That's turboable to lots of guys run it at 1.81, and there's some of the real hot rodders are out there with supercooling and who are digging into the kernel of the thing to make it even faster. It's 64-bit, it's quad core, got an A72, so A7 Broadcom, or A7 ARM. Thanks, Mario. Right, that's the current version, the Raspberry Pi 4 or 4 Plus. Oh, it just drives me nuts when somebody deletes their message. I gotta know what it was. QWERTY.uio.com. Nice, yeah, that's a good one. I like that. Welcome, Brandon, nice to see you. And Falak, nice to see you, thank you. Dr. Quinn is helloing. Would session ID issued by server be the same if one is logged in an application at the same time on desktop, tablet, and mobile? I'm not sure which specific kind of session that you're talking about, but I believe I'm going to go with the answer is no, unless you're doing a shareable VNC where everybody uses the same port, like port 5901, everybody does get kind of the same session ID there. But if I open up a PuTTY session with a Pi in one, or any Linux machine, and then open up another PuTTY session from the same computer to the same host, they get different session IDs. So I think the general answer, if I get the gist of your question, is no. Ombudsman. Hey, Dave, I'm looking at setting up a NAS for a file server for home use. Do you think Pi 3B or 4B would work better than setting up an old desktop using FreeNAS? No. If you're, 3 is different because 3 has a much slower USB port. It shared the chip that controls its communication with the network interface card chip. And so there's some sharing and you got much less performance on that. The 4 has a dedicated chip now, so we get almost full speed with the USB 3 ports and certainly with the USB 2 ports, and almost full speed with the RJ45. It's not quite full speed, but not for reasons of sharing, for some other techno reasons. If you set up a NAS with Pi, you're going to download and install NAS software that's particular to the kind of NAS that you're going to do. If you're going to do an SMB one, or if you're going to do something that's a little different, maybe a Plex or whatever, it's a single function thing. FreeNAS, of course, is an x86 based thing, and it's got about 37 different kinds of shared file servers in there, including SMB and including a ZFS in there, and there's some other good ones. Performance-wise, I run a NAS. I know a lot of people who run NASs. If you go check out NAS in the raspberrypi.org forums, You'll find just lots and lots of input. And some people say this one's a little better than that one. But no, I think it's a very fine thing to do to set up a network addressable storage, a shared external file system, shareable. I would go 4 though for the performance. I deleted because I said bye on chat instead of the CMT. Okay. Yeah, so you're there, right? We got to do bye instead of exit. Okay, let's roll on then to yet another topic. I want to talk about a thing called, how we doing on time? Perfect. SCP, Sierra Charlie Papa, those of you in the know. That stands for Secure Copy. Now, CP is a command I'm going to show you in about 20 minutes or so that's used in the terminal environment to copy files from one place in a Linux box to another place. Secure Copy, we use that to move files, kind of like we do with FTP, remotely back and forth between an SCP client machine and a server running SSH server. So there's no FTP protocol involved. So step number 1, recognize we're doing this over SSH. We're using file copy services. It's not FTP over SSH. It's Secure Copy. It's its own thing, but it does use the SSH protocol, and therefore it's port, I'm not going to make you type it in, 22, right? So SCP is natively found in Windows environment, in most Linux environments. Again, I didn't check Mac. I assume that since they don't have FTP, they probably don't have SCP, but it's probably installable. There is a challenge with SCP that doesn't exist in FTP. In fact, probably a lot of them. It doesn't have all the capabilities and power of FTP, but its biggest challenge in my mind is, unlike, FTP, is there is no way to get, man, I'm sorry, I drank this and caused me to hiccup. There is no way to get a file listing of the files that you want to work with on the remote host or on the local host. Now you can do that on the local host in advance before you start the process, but you've got to know the name of the file that you want to copy to or from, the location of the file that you want to copy to or from. So there's nothing like an ls command or anything like that. There's only one command. Everything is done as switches and parameters after SCP. So the general syntax is SCP followed by the source path and or file, followed by the destination. The source can be the remote box and the destination can be your local site, or it can be the other way around. But the order is always SCP, source, destination. So let me show you a simple one. We're going to do this from a regular command line. I'm in Windows. I don't need sudo or anything like that. I can do a clear screen here. So I know that I've got an SSH server over there. I know that I have an account called Pi over there. Let me share this. Click. All right, so I'm sitting at a Microsoft command line prompt. And I'm going to say, I am sharing screen. I don't want to typo this. First of all, I'm going to use a file that's in my current folder. So I'm just going to do a directory listing here and see what's there. There's those demo files that I was working with earlier. And I like this one, the world voltage PNG file. So it's all lowercase, it's all one word, there's no spaces or dashes, so I've learned what I need to learn. Check something here, just make sure I got my ducks in a row. All right, I'm going to put the command up and then I'm going to explain it. Oh, you know what? I wrote out a demo command and it doesn't use the world voltage, so fine, I'll use that. Doesn't hurt anything. Clear screen. So I'm going to copy this demo file. So I start with the SCP command, and then here's my source. The current folder is assumed, so all I have to do is put the file name. Now I got to specify a user who's got an account over on the server running SSH. So there's an account called Pi over there. at, and then the name or the IP address of the server, and then a colon. And the colon with nothing after it means this user's home folder. So the home folder in Raspberry Pis by default is whack home, whack username, Pi. So this one isn't going to go down into that files folder or the FTP folder. It's going to go straight into my home folder. So I'm going to hit the enter key. And he says, oh, wait a minute. Give me a password for that Pi account. Okay. RASPBERRY. Okay, I copied demo file over there. So let's prove that. Let's go establish a session over there. I'll use FTP because I can see with that just as, oh, can't use FTP. So I'm going to cancel that thing. I'm going to bring up a PuTTY session real quick, stand by, and then I'll share it with you. I would do this with you, but it breaks connection. Stop it, there's PuTTY. Good Lord, am I open? Do I have a PuTTY session open? Oh, what are you doing? There it is, okay. So if I try and capture the PuTTY session and show you that I'm using it, as soon as it connects, it breaks the connection. I got to go to another one. So I'm just going to do this 192, stop it. 192, 168, 1.137. This is an SSH connection, port 22. I'm going to log in and then I'm going to show, oh, heck, I can share this now. I will. Share here. Okay, so I ran the PuTTY program to establish an SSH connection with my server. And I'm going to log in as Pi. Password Raspberry. And this has nothing to do with what I just did. This was just a way for me to get into the system so I could show you something. So if I type in PWD, present working directory, I'm in my home folder. Can I make that font bigger? No, so I'm just gonna have to describe it. If it's too small, sorry. But that's all right. I do an ls and hey, there it is, demo file.txt. So I SCP'd, I use secure copy to copy that file from my Windows machine to the home folder of a computer, a Raspberry Pi in this case, that's running an SSH server. Let's unshare that for a sec. Okay, back to me. I can do the same thing on the other side with a similar command. Okay, good, font size was fine, thanks. I could use SCP to copy a file from the Raspberry Pi to my destination. I would simply say SCP, and then the same kind of syntax, pi at IP address, colon, and the name of the file, if the file is in my home directory there. So I got to know where it is. In this case, I know it's in the home directory and that SCP likes home directories. And then for the destination, I would put dot, which means current directory of my local computer. And it would go get it. It's SCP, so it uses SSH, so it's secure, right? That means it was encrypted when it came across the wire. Everything is encrypted as we do this stuff. There is just two other little nuances to it to make it kind of useful. You don't have to use current directory of the source and destination boxes. You can put full paths. Let me demo one for you. I'll copy this guy out. Now, this command isn't going to work because I don't have it set up to match the way I typed in the command, but I'm just going to type in the text of the command to show you the syntax. Over here, share. Command prompt, that's a good thing to share. Stop it. Okay, we'll do a clear screen. That's a Windows command. And now we'll put in the command. So SCP, since I didn't put a pi with an @ sign at the beginning, that means it's going to be a local thing. So, but I can use a full path here. Now this is a Microsoft version of SCP. So here I'm going to use backslashes. And I didn't practice all the Microsoft stuff, so it might be C:\/ path to the file. And then when we get over here to the destination, whose account I'm going to use at, what server I'm going to do this at. And then when we use the colon, it means home folder, and it has an implied slash on it. So colon in this case means /home/pi/. And then I'm just going to continue typing what would come after that for any more folders or files. So there's an invisible slash here now, /FTP/files. And I don't have to specify a file name because it's already got a name. I could create a new file name here, copy demofile.txt on the C drive and call it coolfile.abc in the FTP/files folder under the home directory on the destination. And you can reverse these. I could do this SCP pi at 192.1 colon, and I could go nuts. If I've got SCP, I might know of one up in the slash. So by starting this with a /, it says ignore the home folder, use a real path, etc gnome.conf file. Stop it. So there's my source, and then my destination could be current working directory dot or C:\temp, whatever. So SCP, really useful command. You can use it on any computer that's running a secure shell. And I mentioned this last week, a really cool experiment that I did. I found a secure shell program that I could run on my Android phone. So I installed it. And after that, I did some looking around for what its home directory is and what the default user accounts are and passwords and so forth. And I just used SCP from my computer to here. I could send files up to it. I could send files down from it. That is slicker than anything. Well, maybe not anything, but slicker than a whole lot of things, right? All right, let's see if I missed anything that I want to talk about that. So your paths can be absolute or relative. They start with either the home folder of the user or your current working directory where you're at. Destination, if it's a single dot, means current directory. Oh, copying multiple files. So you can use wildcards. I want to copy all the files that start with the word demo from here to there. I would say SCP demo ***, and then the destination pi at 192.168.1.137 : And that's the way to get a whole heaping bunch of them. If maybe there's only 3 or 4 files that I want out of this folder to get copied over there, then you list them. Copy space first file name, space second file name, space third file name, space destination. And you can always tell the destination because it's the one that's got the colon and the @ sign. Or you can always tell the difference between a remote and a local. Okay, it's cool. It's useful. And for me, it is stunningly useful, especially in prepping for these kinds of presentations. But here's where it gets magical. Let's say that I've got this is Texas. I got a game camera. And it's in my backyard because I've got big woods in the backyard and we get deer and feral hogs and all kinds of small rodent type creatures. And I want to video that, or I want to take snapshots of them. Every time some motion happens in the back 40, the camera takes a picture. And the pictures all have the same file name and they all start backyard photo and a sequence number and a date. except when I get up, I get showered and I jump in the car and I head to work. So I want to see when I'm at work. This is what I do at work. I don't do my work. I don't write scripts or teach classes. I want to call home and see what's there. Well, wouldn't it be cool if I had a script or something like that running either on the Pi to SCP send it, or on my computer down at the office to SCP go get it? Yes, it would, except it prompts me for a password. So I actually have to be there and be interactive with that command. I don't want to do that. Well, here's something we can do, and I will show you this in a couple of sessions from now, how to do a key exchange between an SCP client and an SSH server. So when they both have each other's keys, they don't need passwords anymore. I say, hey, connect over to that guy using account Pi, and he checks Pi's key and he checks my key, and if they all match up magically, and it's encrypted so nobody can capture the keys online, and then as part of that script, I say, now SCP get all of last night's photos and copy them to this folder, and I can check them out when I'm on lunch break, because I would never do it outside of a break period or something like that, and see what's kind of cool. So you can script SCP activities by previously exchanging keys, so you don't have to be involved with an interactive mode. So I will show you how to do that in upcoming lessons and presentations. All right, that finishes up presentation number 2. The other 2 are going to be fairly quick, and we'll have time to do close down. So let me take a moment and check questions, see if anything's cool going on that I'm missing. I'm picking up where Scott posted the raspberrypi.org forums link, just so you can see where I'm at and follow along with me. Mario, question for Dave. We have spoken about Kali Linux possible on Raspberry Pi. I read that Kali is more networking and hacking, so it's not its own distro OS, just networking. Suppose I can still load it. I don't know if that's a statement or question. Yes, you can still load it. So yeah, Kali is not a version of Linux. You can take an Ubuntu version of Linux and turn it into a Kali box. All it is a bunch of network, I hesitate to use the word hacking tools, but some of them I guess are. They're network exploratory tools. And then what makes it Kali is having those, and then having a menu interface that allows you to access those things without having to know where they are and what all those utility names are. So yeah, if you want to go download a version of Kali, and Kali.org, I think is there. Scott can double check that for me. They've got a pre-built set of Kali with some operating system, and maybe they've customized the distro for it, but I have used and seen it run on plenty of different distros. And yes, you can download it, but again, if you're not looking to do network hacking, you don't need Kali. Raspberry Pi OS, Ubuntu, any of the other, Mint. Tolowit, talking to, okay, so Total Seminar channel isn't here, Tolowit. That's Mike when he's online. So Scott or me is the appropriate recipient. I just discovered CanaKit on Amazon for Raspberry Pi. Are these kits decent? Where do you buy your Pi? Okay, CanaKits are decent. We sell lab packages, Total Seminars does, to school systems that's got PC motherboards and components and lab manuals, how to build a PC and labs that they can do with them and so forth. And we include within them a Raspberry Pi kit. And because these are done sometimes at the junior high level and high school level, folks don't always have the equipment or the ability to go out and source the equipment that they need. So we buy for them CanaKits, and CanaKits come in all kinds of different flavors, very bare bones stuff, a motherboard or a Raspberry Pi board, a case and a power supply, and then some of them are much more complete with lots of other accessories in them. So the company buys CanaKits, I don't. And for most of you, I don't expect that you will need to do that. Everything that's in there, if you have a day or two, you can source very effectively and save some of the profit that CanaKit makes and that Amazon makes. So you need a Raspberry Pi, you need a micro SD card, you need a case, you need a power supply. That's the minimum. You can get away with that if you've got a mouse, a keyboard, a monitor, and an HDMI cable. Or even if you don't have those things, if you're getting some of the information and lessons from me, and I got a really cool one coming up that'll show you how just to use those 4 things, how to preset it up so that you can SSH to it as the very first connection you make, or VNC GUI to it. You won't need anything. But if you don't have any of that stuff, obviously CanaKit's not selling monitors. They do sell in some of their kits HDMI adapters, because the current version has a micro HDMI and you need full size for your monitor probably, and a couple goodies like that. But everything that's in those kits, you can mostly source yourself and do less expensive, but it's not as convenient, right? You buy a CanaKit, everything is in there. You open up the box and it's almost like Legos or Tinker Toys if you're old enough. Where do I buy mine? I buy individual components from Micro Center. You can get them online, or if you're in a larger city, there's one there. Fry's online. They seem to be killing many of their offerings. It looks like they're getting ready to head out of business. They still have lots of accessories for them. You can get them direct from Amazon. I bought them off eBay. I'll tell you where I buy a lot of them is off Craigslist. Now we're Houston. We've got a huge Craigslist. So I can find typically a lot more than if I go to Dubuque, Iowa, or something like that. When they're new, you can't get them in any of the sites like eBay unless you're willing to pay 3 or 4 times the price, especially when there's a shortage of them. I mentioned this last time too. Check that. Check my last session where we talked about the U.S. distributors, Adafruit, not Element 14, Newark.com. But I get them wherever I can get my hands on them. Scott retracted his message, you wuss. Okay, Kali is definitely its own distro. It's available. Yeah, they have their own distro. Yeah, there you go, Scott. Scott's telling you can run a Kali distro in a virtual machine in any platform, just about. Okay, sorry, says Mario, still getting used to work on different screens from one PC, but love this. Want to buy another screen, then I go Matrix all over. I'm with you. Yeah. Oh, and the new Raspberry Pi has 2 monitor outputs, so you can go dual screen on the Raspberry Pi 4s. I did that at work, but I haven't done it yet. I've seen another game in your neighborhood, but it's a totally well-dressed game. CSGO. Mario was for Scott. Keep trying CSGO. Yep. Sure thing. Now remember, Mario, your Kali download, if it's x86 base, it'll run on a PC, but not on a Raspberry Pi. You've got to get a version that's designed for Raspberry Pi and the ARM chip to get it selling on that. That's all right, Tolowit. It's all good. Hi, Dave. Hey, Nice Tries No Cigar is here. Any tips on getting Pi 4B 2 gig model built-in wireless adapter to enable monitor mode? Saw a few things about Nexmon patch for Kali, but haven't tried it. To my knowledge, it's working fine in monitor mode. Everything up until then has. I know it works. I ran the 2B with Kali in monitor mode, and it ran just fine because I set it up one day. I had it running at my desk. Mike meandered over to my work area and said, "What you got there?" And I told him, and he said, "Mine." And he grabbed my Pi. We unplugged it and sent it over to his office, and he plugged it in, and he screwed around with that for a couple of weeks. And then he went to work in his hermit cave on a book, and I was able to get it back. But that was a 4B with 2 gigs, so it works. Need to get me some Raspberry Pi. Yes, a slice of it. All right, a sip, see if I don't choke on the throat lozenge and tea. And let's talk now about the Linux file system. So in order to understand the Linux file system, we could start as if Linux was the first computer that we all were exposed to. But of course, it's not. The first computer that most everybody here was exposed to was a PC or a Mac. And Mac does things a little differently, and I'm not going to use that as a learning basis. I'm going to start with something that we're mostly familiar with, and that's our friend, the Windows PC. It's used an upside down tree file system from Microsoft almost since the beginning. So maybe you don't think about this. We're going to add something here that perhaps is something you were aware of, but never really put any conscious thought into. The top of the file structure, remember it's this upside down tree structure in a Windows system, is a computer, right? If you're running Win 10, it's this PC. If you're running versions of Windows previous to Win 10, it's my computer or whatever. And then underneath that, you have one or more partitions. For most people, there is one hard drive and the entire hard drive is partitioned. But sometimes we can take one hard drive and break it up into multiple partitions. We call those partitions, or we refer to them by drive letters, C:, D:. If you got floppy drives, if that old machine is still sitting on your desk running and it's got floppies, send a picture. I'm going to want to see it. Then you have the A drive and the B drive. And of course, everybody's favorite optical drives are E drives and F drives and whatever. Then underneath each of those letters, you have the top of the traditional file structure, the very single folder or directory that lives right there in the top of the C drive, we call root. And in Microsoft, we represent root with a backslash. Underneath that, we can put files right in the root directory. We can put folders in the root directory. Here, let me show you something. This may look familiar to you. Share. By the way, I was burning the midnight oil last night, whipping up some slides, and these look like I had just too many when I made them. They're a little on the sloppy side, and as I looked at them today to get everything organized, I realized, oh man, but it's too late to fix, so probably should have put a colon here. So here's your basic, essential Windows file system. Got a couple of folders here off the root of the C drive. Here's one called level 1. In there, there's a couple of folders. One of them is called level 2. And in the level 2 folder, I've got my friend, a little file called file1.txt. So if I write that down as a path, or in certain utilities in Windows, you'll see this path actually displayed. Like if you go into Windows Explorer, you see it on the top bar written out as C:, the root directory, the first level folder underneath it, level 1, a backslash to separate folders from each other, level 2, a backslash to separate the file from the folder, and there's the whole syntax that describes C:, backslash, level 1, backslash, level 2, backslash, file1.txt. So there's something we all know and love and understand very well. I'm going to stay on here and I'm going to move to a Linux file system. A Linux file system has a computer at the top of it, it's implied, but it doesn't partition storage devices into drive letters. There is no drive letter. The file system is taken as a whole. So the top of the file system, however many storage devices you have in there, doesn't matter. We're going to put storage devices in various different folders, depending on what they are and some factors about them. So the top of the file system is the root, just like it was in the past, except now we use forward slashes. Linux is a forward slash world. After that, it's all pretty similar to the Microsoft system. We've got files and folders that can go in directories. So I made one here called home. Underneath that, I made one called pi. And underneath that, I put a file, not surprisingly, called file1.txt. So the path for this thing, whoa, I accidentally wrote path in there. I got a typo. That's what happens when I was working late. So this should say, get rid of this path, /home or whack home is the more traditional term. Whack home, whack pi, whack file1. There's how we do the thing in the magical, mystical world of Linux. Cool. Hold, please. Reading notes. I want to show you a command. Really, really cool command. Super powerful. I'm going to join up here with my putty command. I've still got an SSH section going. Session. Yep, it's still working. Clear, share. Now the command that I'm going to show you is built in to Raspberry Pi OS. It's not built into every version of Linux out there. It's called tree. And if your computer doesn't have tree, if your Linux version doesn't have it, I'm not going to hit the enter key because I don't want this to take too long of a time. But to get the command I'm going to show you, it's called tree. It's a really simple install. There's no parameters and no configuration. You would simply say sudo apt or apt-get, doesn't matter. I'm an apt guy these days. Install, and then the command sudo apt or apt-get install tree, and tree is installed. But again, it's built into Raspberry Pi OS. I'm just going to type in the word tree, and we're going to get overwhelmed here. What tree does is it starts at the top of the file system, and it lists in this textual graphic format. There was so much there, it overwhelmed my putty screen, so I can't get all the way up to the top. But it showed me every folder and every file in kind of a text graphical representation. Now, that's too much. So I can use tree and say, I only want to see a structure from a particular level on down. So maybe I just want to see the tree structure in and under the Pi home folder. So I'm going to say tree and then a path to that folder. Whack home, whack Pi. And there was still a lot of stuff there, but not so much that it didn't totally and completely, I hope. Yeah, I did this last night, it worked. Overwhelm my screen. Am I going too far? Come on. Ah! No, there you go. So there's even so much stuff in and under there, but at least it wasn't the entire tree structure of the entire Linux file system. Let's try one more. How about tree, whack home, whack Pi, whack FTP. Hey, there we go. So under that folder, there is only one folder called files. And in that folder, there's no other folders, directories, but these are the contents. So this is kind of like doing an ls command. And got to tell you that tree has a bazillion different switches. And I'm not going to go into them. I just want you to know about the tree command, how to get it, and what you can do with it. You want to go nuts with that thing? You take the output, and instead of sending it to your screen, send it to a dot matrix printer. You got a confetti party at that point. So tree command. And tree is available for non-Debian distros. Okay, did that. Oh, I want to show you two more commands with tree, one or two quickie switches. See, I can do a clear on that, then share it. All right, so I'm going to do the same command. I'm going to go to my home folder again, but this time I don't want to see everything. I don't want to see all files and directories. I just want to see the directories under there. So I'm going to add a switch, tree -D, directories only. And then, okay, where do you want to see this stuff? Whack home, whack Pi. There we go. So now by taking the files out of the mix, I just get to see the directory structure. Still a lot of stuff. Got a lot of directories and subdirectories under there, but not so much that it overwhelms. How about I don't want to see the depth of directories. I just want to see the directories that are in a particular folder. I'll show you two examples of that. We'll do a clear here. I'm going to say tree -L space 1 layer deep. And then the path where I want to see this stuff. Whack home, whack Pi. Oops. Yeah. Really, it works. Oh, capital L. Everything in Linux is case sensitive, right? There we go. So there's the first layer of everything that includes files, because I didn't do a -D, that's directly in my home PIA folder. And with that, let's now take a look at the root folder, tree minus capital L1 root. In fact, root is always implied, so I don't even need to put that. Sorry, it's not implied. I got to specify it. It's only implied if you're in the root. There we go. So there's the root and all of the directories that are in the root folder. So tree command, really useful. D-share. What I want to do now is to do some manual navigation of some of the folders, and then I want to look and do a quick definition of all of the important main critical folders. There's basically two commands that you're going to use all your life in the as a text user, from a command line user, let's call it that. So clear. Always want to know where I'm at. Present working directory tells me I'm whack home, whack pi. So to move out of this folder and into another folder, we use the CD, lowercase, change directory. And I can use a relative, which means from here down structure, or I can use a full structure. So I want to move from wherever I'm at to the root folder. CD, always a space after a command in Linux. If this were DOS, I could say CD / just like that, and it would work. But CD / doesn't work in Linux. CD space /. So I didn't get an error message. That's how we know that something worked when you're in SSH. So if I really want to see what I just did, I got to do pwd, and it says, okay, you're in the root. When I'm there, I can say ls. It stands for list, but I always think of it as list stuff. And this particular version of SSH is kind enough to color code things. And there's a config file. You can change the colors of these, but folders are in blue, files are in white. The temp folder that's got the green highlight, I'll get into that a little later. But what you're seeing here is 20 different folders. And interestingly, if I say tree, current directory is assumed, -L1, there's the same 20 folders just shown in a vertical structure. If you're above a folder and you want to go into it, see the Etsy folder here, he's kind of an important folder. You precede it with a space, CD space Etsy. Do a pwd, there I am in the Etsy folder, and I'll do an ls with no switches. Lots of files, lots of folders. Let me pick a simple fun folder here. Yeah. I had one in particular in mind. And where did you go? Oh, it's not in Etsy. That's right. It's in a different place. We'll get to it. So I'll just pick one at random here. There's a Bluetooth folder in here. It's below me. So I'll simply say CD space Bluetooth. Didn't get an error message, so it works. You can see my prompt here says whack Etsy, whack Bluetooth. So that helps. And I can confirm it with pwd. And I can see what's in the Bluetooth folder with ls. All files, there's nothing blue in here. They're all configuration files. Now let me jump back up one level. To move up one level, we use the CD command and a double dot. Single dot means current directory, double dot means up one level. So now I'm back up in the Etsy folder. And in here, I want to do another ls. This time I'm going to do -l, lowercase. And that does a couple of things for me. It changes it into a vertical representation, and it gives me a lot more information about the files and the directories. There's all kinds of different ways to sort with ls. I can make directories appear first. I can do them reverse alphabetical order. I can do last changed, last accessed, whatever. I see the owner of these files. I see the permissions on these files. If it starts with a D, it's a directory. So if you don't have color coding, it's a good thing to know. File size, touch dates, goodness gracious, days, years, months, time. And there's a lot of other goodies here, but ls and ls-l are the two primary tools that you're going to use to look at the contents of any kind of file or folder. I'm going to cd back to the root, clear the screen. Clear is a SSH command. And there was one more ls that I wanted to do. Let me unshare that, bring my head back up for a second. Share is up here, click that. Okay, there's me. And I'm going to share something else. This is an abbreviated graphic of what your standard Debian Linux file system looks like. And most other distros look pretty much the same. So at the end of today's presentation, I've got a slide for you. I'll put up on screen so you can copy stuff from it. And we're making headway on getting a place for me to put these downloadable resources, and that'll include website links and things like that. But this is your basic. So up here, we've got the root folder, and we've seen the Etsy folder, and we're going to see the bin and the boot folder and a couple others. Okay, we'll get on that in a second, Scott. All right, let me look at my notes, and then I'm going to go take a look at the feed for a second. I've talked about distro. All right. So let me go take a look at the feed and get caught up for a second. I don't share a lot. Oh, when I get my backyard visit, yes, I would be very happy to show you some of the animals that have moved into our backyard. I think I need to go a little farther up than that. Okay, there we go. So that's about a good place to start. Reading. Hey, Dave and everyone. A little late today. Who turned up? Brendan. I saw you. Thought I saw you. Welcome, Brendan, if I didn't say hi. I am root. That's a t-shirt, Tulawit. You need to make a t-shirt. Do it cool, not just some garbagey magic marker. Wear it and shoot it. Send it to me in his email and I will get it. We should do that. We should get pictures, Scott, of all of our participants and do kind of a visitor wall. I know. That's what I'm famous for at the company. In a day, I'll come up with 20 wacky ideas and one or two of them will be acceptable to the rest of these heathens in my mind when it comes to my ideas. Nice try. No Cigar says, okay, cool. I tried it unsuccessfully with Raspbian, so I figured it wouldn't work in Kali either, but nope, it works. And I haven't tried it with straight Raspberry Pi OS. I've only done it with Kali. I'm Groot, I'm root. I like. I didn't make the connection. That's absolutely right. Well done, Mario. Thanks for making the connection for me. Ian wants to know, if you don't put any dot, does anything change? I was coming to a little secret on that, but I'll give it away right now. So all the modern distros of Linux right now have this amazingly cool little shortcut. If you don't put anything after the CD command, you just say CD enter, it automatically takes you to your home folder. So if I type in CD next time I open up that session, I'll do that, and we'll see wherever we are, 37 levels deep or 8 levels high, I type CD enter, I will suddenly find myself in whack home, whack pie. What is the shadow in the file directory? Hold that thought. Yes, I agree. Visitors will love it. Okay, hello, Simon Edling. Hi, nice, very good to see you. All right, so I have again at the end a slide that's going to have a link to the page that I just posted, the graphic, and a lot of other goodies. So what I want to do is I'm just going to talk about a handful of the folders that are up there, and I guess for a couple of moments. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna bring the actual folder structure up again, which is here. Share it. All right, it's gonna be a little bit of talking narration here for a minute, but bear with me. I'm gonna make this really quick and see if I can see it all. So I'm gonna look at these folders in alphabetical order. My notes may not match what's on the graphic up here. But we got the whack bin folder. Bin is short for binaries. It's where some programs and applications are stored. Binary files, certainly many of the files that come native with your distro. And as you add some programs and files, they will be included in there. And there's also subfolders inside. The boot folder. So this holds the files necessary for the operating system to start booting. Usually everything is kept in there, but let me give you a really cool little thing about the Raspberry Pi. Now they're having trouble with this on Raspberry Pi 4. Raspberry Pi 4 was so different than all the other Raspberries that booting from anything other than the micro SD card doesn't work perfectly. But we were able in all the other versions, and they will be able to in Raspberry Pi 4, to boot from any kind of external storage device, a flash drive, an external SSD, an external hard drive, whatever the case may be is. So there's this cool little workaround. What you do is you take a copy of the boot folder and you simply put that on your external device that you would like to boot from. And then you take most of those files out of your micro SD card, except for a couple critical ones. And what happens then, the Raspberry Pi starts to boot up. He looks only in the micro SD card. He finds the files to get him started. And then when he runs out of files, there's enough info in there to direct him to complete the boot from the external device. Now, why do I want to boot from the external device? Two reasons. They're faster than micro SD cards, and micro SD cards wear out. So while that one's only a read folder, that's not going to wear out. Parts of the other parts of the micro SD card will, as you write to them over and over and over, and eventually that's going to cause the card to corrupt in such a way that it'll never boot again, and you'll lose everything. So we use the micro SD using only the folder that ever gets read. It doesn't get written, so it doesn't wear out. And then we put all that other cool stuff on things that are a little more tolerant, a little more resilient to rewrites. Okay, we've got a folder called whack dev. Can I see that over here? I've got some stuff there. There's whack dev over on the right side. And you can see this location of special or device files. So there's drivers in here and other support files for hardware. The etc folder. Now this is so cool. There's support files, there's configuration files in here. It's a little bit of everything, but it's so important that Microsoft has an etc folder. If you go digging around your Microsoft system, it's under :/Windows /System32 /drivers, doing this from memory, /etc. And there are a handful of files in there. And if and when I ever teach, or Mike teaches an IP address and talks about hosts files and how to use them, that's where you're going to find that. We have, let's move this down so I can see it. Over on the right-hand side, the home folder. When you create a new user account, they are given a home folder. By default, it's the same as their account name, and certain folders and files get put in there. So they have a working environment. So Raspberry Pi OS certainly does that. I'm living in Whack Home, Whack Pi. Lib is where libraries live, support programs for programs, and they control peripherals. Whack Media, okay. So this is part of a question that came in, I think, from Tulowit. Where do external storage devices get mounted? Well, by default, if you plug an external storage device in and try to access it, it will automatically be installed under the media folder. So it's a relatively modern one. So if you plug in a USB drive or an SD card and you have the auto mount feature enabled, that thing is going to turn in, that device will turn into a subdirectory, a subfolder under media. The MNT folder, where's that in our handy dandy little list on the right-hand side, is where we manually, I just did something. Okay, I fixed that. Where we manually mount external storage devices. It's not used much today. There are other ways to do. That's a very old folder. OPT files or OPT folder. If you create your own program, if you compile it, you take the raw code and you compile it, the result and sometimes the core code, the precompiled code, goes into whack opt or whack opt whack bin. All right, here's what I want to show you. Let's take a little bit of fun of this one. Whack proc. Where is that over? Do we have it listed here? Var user bun. Okay. All right, I'm going to stop sharing this. Hi there. Did you miss me? Where are we at? 46. I got 15 minutes to go. I'm not going to get into the cool lab today. I'm going to finish this, then take questions. Maybe I got time for the cool lab. We'll see. Okay, let's pop into a terminal session. I'm going to CD root. Clear screen, by the way. So PWD, I'm in the root. What happens if I do CD without any parameters, just CD enter? I do PWD. Now you can see over here, there's a tilde after the colon. Tilde is another shortcut in many Linux distros that means home folder, whack home, whack pi. And if I do PWD, there it is, whack home, whack pi. Okay, going up to the root, ls, there's my folders, and there's proc. So I'm going to CD into proc. CD, it's below me, so space proc. I'll do an ls. See a lot of folders in here, but I have a file here called CPU info. If you want to look at the contents of a file, you use the cat command. Probably stood for catalog. I've never looked up its etymology. I don't know what it stands for. Category, don't know. But simply cat followed by the name of the file, CPU info. Now what happened is when Raspberry Pi OS booted up, it does some boot processes and it gathers some information. He says, I'm going to find out about your storage devices and about your memory and about your processor, and it saves that information to various files. So this is where it saves some of the core information about the processor. So here we go. This, I'm running a Raspberry Pi 3 on this one. It's an ARM7. And I don't know all of these things. I'm kind of a hardware guru, but I never dug much into this file. But here is a very important piece of information, including the leading zeros. If you want to turn on the various hardware accelerations that your system needs, if you want to do audio acceleration or video acceleration, here's the serial number that Raspberry Pi Foundation wants to know. Cool? Cool. Go back to the home folder, stop the share. I'm almost done with this. I tell you what, I'm not going to stick that slide back up. I'm just going to share a couple of the folders we haven't talked about. There is a folder called root off of the root folder, amazingly, and it is the home directory of the super root user. There is a built-in account into most Linux versions whose name is the word root. And oftentimes it's disabled. You got to enable it. But it is where all of the other administrative accounts kind of sort of derive their power. It's seldom meant to be used, but if you do use it, whack root is the home folder for the super user. Whack run is a fairly modern directory. It stores temporary data, and the system uses it to store temporary data, not you. Hey, I got to run this. I'm going to have to make some notes over here. I'll do them in the whack run folder, and when I'm done, I may or may not delete them. We got bin up on top to hold binaries. We also have sbin. Those are binaries that are only used by the super user. We have a whack usr folder. Now, a million years ago, when Linux was new, whack user was the top of the home directory folders. There would have been a whack user, whack pi, whack user, whack fred. But those are gone. Everybody has switched to whack home as their home folder. And now it's kind of a catch-all folder. It's got all kinds of directories that hold apps and libraries and documents and wallpapers and bleh. I got a folder called whack srv. It contains information and files and data and configurations for the various servers that you install on your Linux box. Whack sys is a virtual directory. Proc is also a virtual directory. Information about devices connected to your computer. Whack temp, temporary files that are used by applications. So an app is running, he says, I got to make temporary notes. That's what it uses. And whack var used to hold variables. Now it's got all kinds of mismatch. Linux uses it, we don't use it. All right, that's the basic core folder structure. I want to look briefly at one more detail at one more structure. Oh, this would be cool. I can do this in 5 minutes and then catch questions and close notes. So terminal, ever so quick. Share. Terminal. So here is my home folder. I'm going to go up one level, cd space ... And the only folder there is me. I'm going to make a user with a new home folder. And the syntax to do that is sudo, because I got to use my powers, user add, one word. And if I want it to have a home folder, I'm going to use the -m parameter. Oops, I lost the S. Sudo user add -m, and then the username will make Fred, all lowercase. What did you do wrong? Sudo user add -m Fred. I don't see any typos. USERADD. Okay, so I didn't test this last night, and I'm not gonna. Just as well, I can do a better presentation on this. In mind, anything critical that I want you to see, let's go into here, CD. Let's use CD just to get to the home directory. So a lot of folders here are going to be similar to what you might find in Windows. I've got media folders, I got downloads and pictures and templates and a desktop and music. You get the idea. And a lot of these I've added, and a lot of them the system has added. When I enabled Python support, it automatically set up Python games. And last week we created the FTP folder. There it is, and a files folder underneath that. All right, more later. That gives me time to do the fun thing here. So let me unshare that, get back to biz. Unshare is up here. All right, let me check the feed, see what's going on with questions. Is that that's going to end our presentation for today. I got a little bit more, but I bit off more than I could chew, but I can finish that all up in the first 10 minutes of next week and then get on to next week's session, which is going to be, I mentioned before, most of the commands that you have to know for A+. And that's pretty painless and doesn't take long. Got a Raspberry Pi from CanaKit. That's a familiar brand or distributor. Yes, we were talking about that a little bit earlier. CanaKit sells all kinds. Okay, great. At this point, it'd be really cool to get Scott to come in. Scott cracks the whip when he comes in. You may have seen that with Mike the other day to make sure we close down on time. Hi, Scott. Good to see you.
Well, hey there.
Hey.
No rush for me.
Okay, I show 5 minutes left. I can do this in 3, I hope. Working on other.
Hey, folks.
Concatenate, says Ian Camacho. Did I say concatenate wrong? I usually get it right. Concentrate, I get wrong. I've got to concentrate. Okay, link. Oh, cat is concatenate. Okay.
Right.
Here we go. Thanks. I believe that's right. And then there's heads and such. Nice to see you, Underrec. Welcome. I'm glad you made it here too. Best place to spend pandemic. Amen. Dr. Quinn, oop, that just slid off the top. I'm almost at the bottom here, so that's good. Remember, Ed Scott is ready with his whip. Not only was he ready, he came in. Did you find any interesting questions that I needed to catch up, Scott? Any on terminals or predictable? Thank you.
No, I didn't see anything special.
Okay.
Basically, just people listening and
Very good.
chatting.
See, Tulowick talking to Underrec. You said you didn't know what it meant. You're right. I didn't know. Thank you, Ian. I appreciate that. More, would you like to know more? We need that little clicker there, right there.
Troopers.
All right. Well, that takes us then to the bottom of the questions. So let me throw this up real quick just to close things out. And what have I got? 4 minutes to do it. So I can do this close and then we can answer questions for 2 minutes. Share this stuff. So if you want to get in contact with me, again, my email, we'll keep this short and simple, daver@totalsim.com, or don't do them both, drushtx. Send me your questions, can be anything, doesn't have to be Pi. I'll take any ITF, ATF, CompTIA, whatever you got. ATF? Different world. For joining us today, we have available for you the 50% off Total Tester standalone products. It's good until, I don't know if I should use the word until or through or whatever, but I think it's good through Sunday, August 9th. Lots of different Total Tester products out there, not just the CompTIA trifecta. Use the code MMLive803 at checkout. I'm going to stick this up here just so if you review down road and you don't have a chance, I haven't got them downloadable yet. Here are a couple of the websites that I used to prep for, and they have lots more information and details. So there's now if you want to do ls -- help, you can see every switch that's supported on there. And they are so cryptic that unless you spend years playing Linux, you won't understand them. So there's a really nice site here that's got the most common and useful switches and examples. I got my SCP general stuff straight from the Raspberry Pi forum. They've got a document there on how to use SCP. It says to transfer files back and forth from a Raspberry Pi. It works on any computer, Linux system or other, that's running an SSH server. And then that's that I had up, and a lot more can be found here at linux.com. Linux.com has a ton of really good general information to learn about Linux systems. This is what we're doing next Friday. Most of these primary Linux commands, you can see this is Objective 1.9 from Core 2, the 220.1002 CompTIA exam. We have to know certain basic Linux command. You got everything that you need to know about ls today, everything that you need to know about cd. I thought I did at least one other here. I've done apt and apt-get last week.
PWD and pass.
Oh yeah, right. We did PWD all over the place. And if my user account creation had worked, I would have done password. But password is how you set or change your own password, or if you've got supervisory powers, how you set or change the password for someone else. It's a great prank. 1 minute to go. Anything cool to catch up on here with this last one? Otherwise, we're going to shut it off.
There was a question on head versus tail. I don't know if you can cover that in a minute.
No, I cannot pull that off in a minute. So get started under rec with a Google. Don't include the word distillery with that. There's heads and tails in a distillery. I'm learning about distilling from a friend. But yeah,
Well,
definitely something worthy of talking about. I'll add that to the pile. Very welcome, Greg. For everybody else, since we're going to shut down right about now, was great having you. My thanks to Michael, to Scott, to all of you for turning up. Certainly Mike, hope he's safe in the Badlands of South Dakota these days. So with that, a big goodbye and thanks.